entonces, les presento a Kurt.
Aquí vamos. All right. Buenas noches, buenas tardes, whatever it is. My español is poquito, très mal. Elementary school only. All right, this talk right now is going to be about being hacked, have been hacked, will be hacked. In essence, all of us, in some way or the other, have been affected by a hack in some form or another. So what I'm going to actually do is first go into a quick slide about who I am. My name is Kurt Grutzmacher. I am a US person, of course. I've been doing pen testing for 12 plus years in different sectors in the US. Used to work for the Federal Reserve System, the central bank of the US, for a while as an engineer and then as a pen tester. Then I went to a utility company, Pacific Gas and Electric, for a little while. Did some fun things in that environment. We have all of our meters now are wireless, so we did a lot of Zigbee and 802.14 type activities. And now I'm a member of the Cisco penetration testing team. I don't Twitter much, but in fact I rarely ever tweet, but I'll put it up there. And I've got a website, of course, because everyone has to have one. So the first question is, woo! Cisco hacks, and we do hacking. That's except of my marketing slides. I had to have them in there. So what's it all about? So we're going to talk about some of the threats. I want to talk about some of the threats I've seen and exploited throughout my years of testing customers, my employers, etc. We're going to show a few real-world examples, things that I have done personally to customers and to others, perhaps. From this talk, you really should come away with the idea that security is really more of a people problem than a technical problem. The things that we exploit mostly are people-generated issues. They're misconfigurations. They didn't think about how this would affect the domain. They didn't think about, using a password called password is really bad. You'd be surprised how often that is seen. And while I am a Cisco employee, I'm vendor agnostic. I love beating up on Cisco products. In fact, the very last job I did, I beat up on Cisco really bad because it's fun. So I actually have more slides, more videos at my website because this originally was a 2-hour presentation we put together for Cisco Live. We've had to kind of shorten it down a bit. So in the past 12 months, 15 months or so, what used to be discussed in closed doors only to certain vendors or certain customers, etc., has become quite public. Public disclosure of breaches is pretty much the norm now. Rarely do you see things about, well, there's a vulnerability in this application that could affect a bunch of people at this company. Now you hear company was hacked, data was lost. 15 million accounts, credit card data, etc. And we're seeing a lot more boasting than we had in recent years. Boasting was a big thing many years ago, but it's come back with a vengeance. And I'll really go into details as to why you don't want to kind of piss off hackers. So remotely buffer overflows, the things that have historically gotten us into servers and workstations seem to be going down in numbers. Local privilege escalations, however, are coming up. We're seeing more and more things of elevating to system level on Windows, elevating local privilege escalations on Linux platforms and Solaris. Historically have been around. They're just coming more and more on the rise rather than the operating system remote overflows. Application client-side attacks are the attack du jour, your phishings, your SQL injections. You saw the slides this morning of the guys that are doing testing, whether or not they're legitimate, actual, supposed to be testing or not. Who cares? It's the internet. You're seeing a lot more SQL injections out there. And nobody is immune. In fact, these are all the people that have been hit in the last year or so. Sony, tons of times. They pissed off hackers tremendously. And in return, their gaming systems, their music environments, their picture distributions, the PlayStation network, and Sony overall was hacked and data released. PBS, the public broadcasting system in the United States, had an attack and publicized. RSA, as you may know, very public, very large affecting incident. HB Gary, we'll go into them in a little bit. Steam recently was hacked, their forums hacked, their user accounts exposed to everybody, or hasn't been released, but they know they've been taken. Citibank had a very dumb web application error that allowed transferring money between accounts from tampering HTTP data. That's so 10 years ago, and this was a couple months ago this came out. And of course, Sega. And how often these happen, again, you can't really see the details in the bottom, but this came out yesterday of a United States water utility had a pump destroyed on its SCADA system and was accessible possibly through the internet. We don't know all the details yet, but this came out yesterday. So industrial control systems are not immune. You've heard this 1,000 times. Obviously, they're going to be attacked in some way. A whole bunch of other here, a bunch of words. You can see the slides later. So who are behind these things? So each year, Verizon comes out with their data breach summary. And it kind of goes through people they've talked to, customers they've worked with who've had data breaches, things that are both public and non-public. They work with, law enforcement in the U.S. and around the world to figure out, who is hacking who, what's happening, etc. So 92% out of all of these attacks are external agents. The people that are sitting on the internet and they get angry at a place, or they just want to get data, or they're just having a good time, etc. 17% are insiders. So the insider threat, which has always been a problem for a number of years, seems like it's smaller. That's only because the 92% of external agents, the external attackers, are getting more and more effect. They're being more vocalized about it. So the insider threat is still there. Very few business partners, and then multiple parties, both insiders, outsiders, collusion, etc. So how do these attacks occur? Well, in general, a hole was found and exploited. That's really what it is. 50% has used some form of hacking, whether it be an overflow, a password account that was easily guessed, or a password that didn't exist, etc. 49% had some sort of malware, where the actual phishing was, a malware agent that maybe be a large botnet callback system. 29% physical attacks, 17% privilege misuse, where you had someone that elevated privileges or used an account that they shouldn't be able to. 11% were some social engineering tactics. Having a phone call to somebody and saying, hey, I'm the help desk. We're seeing some bad stuff happen from your computer. Can you log in? Let me log in for you. What's your password? It works. This nice little chart here kind of shows that by percent of breaches, most backdoor command and control are the methods that are used, followed by easily guessed passwords, brute force dictionary attacks, fingerprinting, stolen credentials, SQL injection, small amount, no login required, etc., etc. So the hacking methods that are being seen by these breaches just vary. They're pretty much everything across the board that you can think of has been done or is being done by attackers. So a famous quote, a good quote from a famous person, you always have to have one in a good slide deck. Amateurs hack systems, professionals hack people. So most incidents originating from internet-based attacks involve some form of social engineering. Both external agents as well as malicious insiders are common threat sources. And so far 92% were not technically sophisticated. There were easy things that were emailed to somebody, or there were phone calls. They're very simple things to do because, again, you attack the people that people will give up the information. Because people ultimately want to be helpful. They want to be, if you call up and say, I have a problem, they want to help you. Rarely are they, I don't know who you are, can you confirm yourself, can you talk to somebody else? That happens once in a while, but it's not often. So let's kind of go into a little hack history. These are two very recent ones. You can tell this slide was done by my manager because it's full of nice pretty graphs and charts and it looks pretty. The RSA attack. If you're not familiar with that, here's what they did. They sent an email with an Excel file to, as far as we know, 3 individuals in RSA Corporation. In this Excel file was a 0-day against Microsoft Windows and Excel. What it did is it created a backdoor on the user's workstation and talked back to a server in China. That server was now, or that workstation was now owned by whoever planted or whoever sent the email. They now have full access, or not full access, they have access into RSA's local network through one simple email with an exploit. They then elevated to find other systems to talk to. They wanted to find, what is the meat of RSA? The RSA tokens, RSA security. Once they found that, they started gathering information about where those servers were located, who logged into them, what were those accounts available, could they guess the passwords, could they find remote vulnerabilities. They were already inside the RSA network at this time. And then once they get all that data, they pumped it back out through their back door, and that's how they have the information of like the RSA seeds for many companies, defense contractors of the United States. Anybody who has an RSA token was probably impacted in some way, shape, or form. So hopefully if you have that, a current contract of the RSA, they've come to you and say, hey, you need to have some new seeds. And you said, okay, I'll go somewhere else, or here are my new seeds, thanks. Now, probably the most obvious one that kind of shows all the different hacking, well, not all of them, but a large majority of hacking techniques in one incident is the HB Gary SQL injection, a lot of fail. Now, if you're not familiar with this, HB Gary is a company that kind of pissed off a group called Anonymous. They did it because they were going to do a talk of some HB Gary Federal, which is a different company than HB Gary, of some work they've been doing to kind of infiltrate social networking and find out who is behind the nicks. Who are the people that are hiding themselves and doing these malicious things? So they had a whole talk that got leaked of some sort that says, HB Gary Federal is going to have this great talk. You have to come see it. We have this great knowledge about the Anonymous group, the DDoS effects, the DDoS attacks against PayPal, against Amazon, against everybody else. We're going to tell you who these people were, who these people who did it, and who they are now. So of course, you piss off the attackers, the hackers, they're going to hit back. And they did with a vengeance. So they found an SQL bug, simple little bug in hbgaryfederal.com. This is the actual page, had the bug on it. It's a CMS that the HB Gary folks thought they could do better than anybody else, so they wrote it themselves. They wrote it with a bug in it because most people who don't, continuously work on developing secure code will make mistakes, and they did. So what the bug allowed through the SQL injection, they can then download the MD5 password hashes of all the site's custom content and the users that manage it. Now, those hashes were not salted, so they're easily cracked. So since they were simple, they used rainbow tables or they used high-speed password crackers, got the accounts for Aaron Barr, the CEO of HB Gary, and Ted Vera, the COO of HB Gary Federal. What they found was that the accounts they used for their CMS were the same accounts that Ted Vera used to show access to support.hbgary.com, so they now had access to that system with an account. And both Ted and Aaron use the same password on the company email, which is on Google Apps, and Twitter and LinkedIn. That is a serious fail. So now they've got this access through a SQL injection, through breaking the passwords. What did they do? Well, on the support hbgary.com server, they used a local exploit. It had been around for a couple months, something that could have been patched through an update. The insecure handling of the origin, the audit, allowed root access. So now they had full root access to all the research data and all the backups on that host. So they deleted everything. Said, you're done. So, since Aaron Barr was also an email administrator of the Google Apps, they now had access to the CEO of HB Gary himself, Greg Hoagland. Now, Greg, if you're not familiar with him, is a long-time hacker. He's a nice guy. He does a lot of rootkit activity. He runs the server called rootkit.com, talking about how can you define rootkits, how can you make them better, how can you improve them, the discovery, etc. But they had access to this guy's email. They can now impersonate Greg Hoagland. Now this one I'm sure you can't read here. I can't even read it. I have to squint on this. So what they did is they took Greg's email and they found out through reading all his emails that there was this one guy in Finland, Jussi, who did all the support of the Unix servers for HB Gary. So he sent an email to him that said, I'm quoting, I'm in Europe and need to SSH into the server. Can you open up firewall and allow SSH through port 59022 or something vague? Is our root password still gobbledygook? Or did we change it to gobbledygeek? Thanks. Sent that as Greg to Jussi. So there's a trust out right now. Now, maybe when you see an email like that from somebody, you kind of go, what? Why would you be asking for that kind of stuff? Not Jussi. He responds back and go, do you have the public IP or should I just drop the firewall? And it's walkie. The remote root access, there is no remote root access allowed. So within one email exchange, he now has the root password to a server. Greg says back, no, I don't have public IP address at the moment because I'm in a small meeting and I'm in a rush. Can you just reset my password to change me 123 and give me the public IP and SSH and I'll reset my own password? He said, okay. Jussi responds, should now be accepting anywhere from 47152 as SSH. Your new password is change me 123. And then he also gives the IP address at some point. We don't have the actual exchange on that. So now he's got, oh, there he does give the SSH later. So he gives the IP address, the root password, a new password for the user, the port open on firewall from anywhere, everything he needs to get onto the server. Well, almost everything. He's missing one thing, the username. So he tries a couple things out here and there. Can't figure it out. So he responds back to Jussi and go, hey, did you reset the user Greg or question mark? Jussi goes, nope, your account name is Hoagland. Yep, I'm logged in, thanks very much. That's a quick email exchange through a trusted support because he felt, hey, this guy actually has the email, look at the headers, looks pretty legitimate. It's coming from Google, right? So what did they do with that access to rootkit.com? Deface the website, dump the database, rootkit.com. Again, unsalted MD5 hashes for all the users of MD5 of rootkit. My account in there too. I have no idea what the password was. And to add insult to injury, they announced it on Aaron Barr's Twitter. Here, everybody, here's the MD5 database. Everybody from rootkit.com, come download it. And of course, to add insult to injury, they put more and more information, bad information about Aaron Barr on his Twitter. So basically, Aaron Barr has no reputation anymore. He came in and said, I can expose these guys. What they did in return was exposed him as both, maybe a bit of a fraud in some ways. I'm sure he was. But everything personal about him, his social security number or his address, everything about the company he was working on. HP Federal is done, is gone, because of this one incident. So what do you take away from that? SQL injection. If they had done a quick security audit of their own data, they're a security company. Why don't they have their own security audits? Well, they felt that they were better than that, I guess. You could have found that. It's a simple SQL injection, came back with a database error. You can't miss that. Weak passwords, poor passwords, using the password across multiple places, privilege escalation vulnerability, improper duty privilege separation, and social engineering. Those are the main bullet items here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullet items. Things that you hear about happening to other people happen to them within a couple hours. So we're going to move on to some cool demonstrations. Little ninja action here. Do a little poll first. How many people here have used a public Wi-Fi without using any encryption, like IPsec, WEP, WPA? Raise your hands. All right, you're playing with fire. Even if that public Wi-Fi is WEP enabled, if you don't know it, WEP is just a dead protocol. It is not secure, it's not encryption, it's not anything. It should never be enabled any place. I still find public Wi-Fis throughout where I live in the San Francisco area of California. They're prevalent. You saw a talk earlier by Luis about the public Wi-Fi on a plane. Open, no controls. Of course, it has to be open. So web cracking itself, if they decide, we shouldn't be open like this, we should put some security on it. They do WEP, they're not secure. If they do WPA, you're more secure, at least from another standpoint. But with web cracking, easy. WPA cracking, a bit more difficult because the key space size is so great. Begins with 8 characters, goes up to 64 characters in a password, in a WPA password. Now, it used to be pretty slow, so you had to use rainbow tables, cow patty tables to take the SSID and the password that you think it is, encrypt it, make it a big table about it, or go through each one individually. That has become less of a problem in recent times due to the graphic processing units or general processing GPUs. So I'm going to show here a quick little demo. Oops. We put it together for our Cisco Live. It's a very short, brief cracking of web. This tool called Silica. We bought it from ImmunitySec. Anyone can get it for a few thousand US. You can also do this on your own manually. This tool makes it pretty darn easy. You click the API you want it. You say, all right, go recover the key, and then you wait. So it's going to collect an ARP. Says, I got it. It's going to start replaying that ARP back and forth. No, it's still waiting for the ARP. All right, now it has an ARP. Now it's replaying that ARP. The whole purpose of replay of the ARP is to receive weak initialization vector packets. Weak IVs really are the crux of the failure of web. With enough weak IVs, you can crack web within minutes. This has a little bit of a time delay, a little speed up. Because, in order to do that, you have to send the ARPs. So since an ARP is a known packet size, it collects it, changes changes a couple of bits, starts resending and starts receiving back ARP replies, basically. Once you have enough, it will take that data and go through the key recovery process. And in total, I should increase this so I can see it. Recovered the key in probably less than 5 minutes total. So now that you have that key, what can you do? Well, with WEP and with no security access points, everything you do is pretty much in the clear. So if I have the WEP key, which I got in less than 5 minutes, or there's no security, I can watch anything that goes across the network. So this little demo here is going to take that information and intercept some cookies between a different person, my laptop really, and Facebook. So first I'm showing here, I'm going to Facebook. I don't have any access right now. And I have no access to Twitter at all. So I'm sitting here as a no authenticated user watching this web-enabled traffic go by. So now I've seen that this person has logged into Facebook or is currently logged into Facebook. I told it replay that session, take the cookie data out of the HTTP, and now, Twitter. I am now that person's Twitter account. That was less than 5 minutes, and I'm now that person. I can be anybody if there's no encryption at all. I can just watch the traffic go across and be that person. You do the same thing with Facebook, because Facebook, once you have your authentication token done, once your cookies are set, it doesn't ask for re-authentication. That's the whole point of HTTP session cookies. You've got that information. And because of NAT, you can't really tie it to an IP address. So with Facebook, you gather the same information. You go to facebook.com, and here I am. I'm now the Cisco kid and have access to everything that person does on Facebook. Now I'm that person. It is that easy to do. And these tools, it cost a few $1,000s, but there are normal tools that you can do, build your own, or download them for free, or find someone's copy of Silica on some places called the Pirate Bay. So what I hope you take away from that is if you have a WEP, which a lot of people do, stop, upgrade. If you have a big distribution center and all you can use is this WEP-enabled scanners, I'm sorry, you're going to have to upgrade. Or you're going to have to isolate that environment in some way, shape, or form, because WEP is just seriously bad. If you're in a cafe and it has no security, pull up an IPsec tunnel, pull up an SSH tunnel. Do something so that that data you're transmitting is not in the clear. It's a very dangerous world out there, and it's very scary. I'm sorry. We're going to move on to one of my favorite things called password cracking, or password recovery if you're officially talking to people that are higher up than you. Now, in the olden days of password cracking, it relied on the speed of your CPU. So you had your old 802.86, 803.86, or 8088, 8086 if you're really old like me. And it was slow because encryption was difficult to do. DES took a long time in 1986, 87 to create, to generate. So to do a dictionary attack would take a couple days to get through 6 characters, 4 characters, 5 characters. You could distribute that across multiple systems, and it helped. You take your key space, you take your dictionary, and you say, you do the first half, you do the second half. We'll meet in the middle. FPGAs helped even more because they allowed you to do gate programming on some of the encryption algorithms. And being a dictionary rule, so taking a password and uppercasing the A and putting 1, 2, 3 at the end, or password 1 password, password 2 password. Those kind of patterns also helped you to crack passwords. Those things still happen today. You still need dictionary hybrid rules. But in the old days, key space exhaustion would take years on a small password. Of course, we have Moore's law of transistors. The number of transistors has increased. In 71, you had 2,000. In 90, you had 1 million. In 2000, you had 100 million. In 2011, that amount just kept getting smaller and smaller between. Now we have 1 billion transistors, 2 billion transistors in the span of 5 years. So things are getting faster, things are getting easier for a password cracker. So these old encryption algorithms are taking less time. What has also helped is the GPU, your graphics processor from NVIDIA, your AMD ATI cards, from brute forcing passwords to rainbow table generations. That computation time has been decreased dramatically. So the Radeon, based on, these are not exact numbers, they're kind of based on the capabilities that have been documented. The Radeon 5970 can perform 8 billion MD5 computations per second. Now, you put 2 Radeon cards in there, 16 billion, 17 billion. You go on further. This one guy claims, you can't really see it, I'll say it's less than 35 billion cracks per second with 4 GPUs. That's on one machine doing MD5. How secure do you think your MD5 password is anymore? If I go back, this little spreadsheet here, it says lowercase, uppercase, and digits, 62 characters. At 8.5 billion passwords a second, an 8-character length password will be done in 7 hours. That's 8 characters. There's uppercase, lowercase, and a number. You increase that size on the key space, it could take another day or two. If you have 1 million passwords to crack, if they're done in 2 days, 3 days, great. So Amazon has these high clustering GPUs. You think, hey, I don't really want to build a system out there. I'll just go buy some space from Amazon. It feels like it's a good idea because it's $2 a computing hour to build. But they use these old Fermi cards, so they're really not that efficient. The total cost of running an Amazon crack for 5 days is $1,000 US dollars. You can build a comparable system, a better system, for literally double that money, $2,000, $3,000. So, for 5 days, is it worth $1,000, or is it worth the computational continuation that says for $2,000, I can buy a machine that does it faster, and I have more control over it. I can do it when I want. I don't have to wait on Amazon to spool up and spool down. And everything's within my control. Obviously, when there's a new GPU card out, let's say the 6970 Radeon comes out, it does things twice as fast. Now you can do 16 billion per card. You just swap the card out. Much faster, much easier. So hopefully this will come through. We're going to quickly show a WPA crack of a handshake I've collected. So WPA cracking is pretty simple as well. You just kind of de-auth some systems that are connected until they say, all right, I need to reconnect, so I'll authenticate. You grab that as you're listening across the wireless, and now you have that data to crack. So the way you crack WPA is through a dictionary or brute forcing. It begins with 8 characters, goes up to 64 characters. So you can see it might take some time. It might take a couple days or a month or two. The great thing about when you have WPA1, WPA2 handshakes is that they may last in environments for years. So you have time. They don't change that often. So aircrack has been the standard way of doing it. It uses the CPU and the dictionary file. And it goes through and it tries all the different master transition keys and guesses what they are. It takes time. We're doing about 4,000 keys a second. 4,500. So I stopped that. It's taking too long. So I'm going to take my system, which has 3 580 cards. I'm going to use those cards to generate the keys for the handshake. So you saw it took, a minute or so, or 2 minutes, and it was still cranking away very low in there. We're now about 40,000, 50,000, 60,000, 65,000 cracks a second, and the password is disclosed. Now, that didn't take long at all. It was a simple key. It was in the dictionary. So if you have an 8-character password on your WPA2 or WPA1 systems, you might want to increase the size or change the key space a bit. You know, put some uppercase, lowercase, special characters, you know, or just increase the size. That really helps. So if you have a Windows environment, which a lot of us do, they're big in corporate worlds, you don't need to crack the passwords. In fact, sometimes you don't even have to obtain the real landman hash and NTLM hash. Now, if you're not familiar with the landman and NTLM, they are basically the encrypted version of a password. Part of the SMB protocol says, all right, you encrypt your password in landman and NTLM, and you send that to me. Well, in the early days, that's what it was. Just you encrypted it and sent that across the wire. All right, well, let's add some security around that. I'm going to send you a key or a nonce. You encrypt it with that key and then pass that across. So now what was passed was not just the actual hash itself, but everything was still done on the client side. The thing is that with the hash itself or with the ability to initiate a communication through landman or through Windows sessions, you don't really need to have the clear text. You don't have to have the password. You just do a thing called pass the hash. So here's a quick little demo. I've put up a Windows 2008 server running a SQL Server 2008. It's running with a domain administrator account. It's kind of weak, but I see it all the time. You create an account called domain/SQL server. You give it domain admin privileges because it's a service. It needs high-level access to the server it's running on, and I'm kind of lazy. So I'm just going to give it that access. So we've guessed what the SA account is because it still exists, but we don't have XP command shell. So we can't pop out of that server to a command line. We can't execute commands on the operating system. However, we can do SQL commands. So we now have SQL access, we have SA access, so we enable a couple of SQL commands, execute them on the host that talks back to our attack host through SMB, through the server message block or Windows protocol. He will connect back to that server with a SQL Server domain administrator account. We now have that hash. We could then start cracking it. It would take some time, but we could do that. What we're going to do is reflect that back to a different domain controller and say, all right, you know, I want to talk to you, but I don't have the password, but I have the hash part. I've talked to the SQL Server. He's talked to me. I've talked to you. You give me the nonce. I've given the nonce back to the SQL Server. He said, all right, here's that data encrypted. I'm going to pass it back. So we pass that nonce back to the SQL Server. It gives us the encryption authentication keys. We pass that to the victim domain controller, and authentication is then completed. We create a service. We are a domain admin. We control that system through a SQL account without having to know what the password is. We then dump the hashes and crack them and use them and all that good stuff that good penetration testers use. So, hard to see, but like I said, all these videos and the slides are up, available online. So you can take this, you can go to your chief security officer, your CEO, your engineer who believes that he knows everything about security, but he doesn't really, and show these kind of attacks, or even do them inside if you have approval. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing a special select command that wants to communicate to another SQL server. What he does is he passes me the authentication because I say, hey, I'm an SMB server, so do the authentication. And I'm going to pass that to the victim domain controller. Does it a couple times, it errors out, but then I've now popped the domain controller here in the very top. I'm now the administrator, the system authority. I can pop into that session. I'm now NT Authority System on that Windows 2003 server. I don't think I do a hash dump, but I don't think I do anything else. Oh yeah, so I'm just adding a user just to show that, hey, I'm an admin. I can do whatever I want. I add a user. And I add them to the local administrators of the domain controller, or to the domain admins. And I realize that I mistyped something, because I often do that with command lines. You can see Cisco Live user, domain admin, from simply gaining access to a SQL server with an easily guessed password. It happens more than you would think. Sometimes we don't have to go to that extreme to set up SMB relay. Sometimes it's as simple as XP command shell. But we see it often. Now, that doesn't say that the clear text password is useless. It really is not. Once you have that information, you can see cross-pollination of accounts. You can see patterns emerge from users' decisions. You can use that information to crack other passwords that may be just as complex. Every year, or the past 2 years at DEF CON, there's been a contest called Crack Me If You Can. This year I participated in it as myself a little bit, just to see that our systems could do some of the stuff. And it was very informative of taking, known passwords and brute forcing things like Blowfish or domain cache credentials 2, taking information that you learn from, easily guessed hashes or easily cracked hashes and doing more complex. So these statistics are from about maybe 2 years of our pen test data. We've seen about 2.7 million different hashes, alphanumeric passwords, just letters and numbers. 39,000. 83,000 of those, or 83,000 of the 2 million, are just lowercase alpha characters only. So they're just lowercase words. Uppercase alpha characters only 14,000. Average password length 8. So they've been long, but like I said, if you can crack 8 characters within a couple hours, it's no longer long enough. So there's a whole other talk that you can do about password strength and how often to change them and how complex they need to be. That is a completely other topic that could last all night. So what can you do to protect yourself, your own little place? Well, in today's borderless network, marketing slide, you have a lot of connectivity into your own environment. Things that used to be simple, it says you have an internet and a DMZ and you have a VPN, may not exist anymore. You may have some data in the cloud. You may have a cloud VPN. You may have your email in Google Apps. So it's a much more complex world than it used to be. It doesn't say that, forget about your perimeter, forget about your internet. Harden it. For those that are World War II buffs, you may remember the Maginot Line issue in France, where they felt that the Germans would come through this one part of France. So they built a very strong fortress with large cannons and hardened systems. The Germans, what they do, took over Poland, went around it. So you've got to think about where your weaknesses are, and static defenses may be a problem. Maybe you're not thinking about the right areas. Client-side vulnerabilities, they're the new norm. Email phishing, you've seen those a number of times in your past. They're still coming along. They're still getting hit all the time. When you hear about advanced persistent threat, APT, they're coming in through those methods usually. And so all of the big APTs, the operational auroras, the RSAs, they've all been targeted email attacks. So look at products, look at solutions of your own to help protect yourself and your users. Because while we may think security, the general person that is doing your finance, the general person that is, the CEO's administrative assistant, they're not thinking security. They're clicking links and going, oh, that kitten is really cute. So, thank you very, very much. Hopefully your questions will be in English.
Thank you very much. ¿Alguna pregunta? Sí, bueno. Te lo voy a tener que traducir así despacio, ¿no? Igual.
My English is bad. Thank you for travel to here. My question is for what packet is possible see the user and pass of the router. I don't know if you understand me.
Password packets. No, maybe you can do it in Spanish and translate it.
¿De qué forma o a través de cuáles son los paquetes y si es posible desencriptar la información del router? Los paquetes que llevan la información de usuario y password del router, ya sea del Linksys o bueno, de cualquiera.
Yes, I can hear you.
So the question is basically, I think if your router has a username and password, is there something that you can like monitor on the network to get that information? Something like that? ¿Sí?
Product-wise. Oh, in the router? Yes. Well, see, there's methods to obtain the router configurations. I don't show it here, but I actually have a video on the website of bypassing SNMP ACLs on Cisco devices to obtain the configuration. Usually you have to know the IP address of in the ACL and the SNMP write community string. Those things can be guessed or they can be enumerated as you find out systems. But over the network packets, depends on what's being used. If it's telnet and you're man in the middle, you're going to see it. If it's SSH, you've got to do more activities to break the keys. I guess, does that kind of help?
¿Está bien la respuesta? Sí, ok. Gracias. ¿Alguna otra pregunta? Para allá, bueno. Bueno, ¿sí pueden pasar el micrófono para allá?
Hi, thanks. I would like to know about a bit more about the web connections. We understood very well that there are many vulnerabilities with the web password. So I would like to know a bit more is what happens with double PA and double PSK? Can you tell a bit more? Is the same problem, or we have to think in a different way for found that difficulties in that kind of codification?
Well, the problem with WEP was just how it was created. There's nothing anyone can do about WEP. The best you can do is not use it. WPA, WPA2 has some weaknesses, but nothing really has killed it the same like WEP was killed. So really your only solution is to use a strong WPA2 key. If you have to use pre-shared keys for your environment, or move to an 802.1x, where you have certificate-based authentication of the authentication servers and using credentials to obtain access instead of just a pre-shared key.
¿Pregunta? ¿Alguien más? Bueno. Bueno, perdón. Ahí tomo.
Hola, durante la charla hablaste de una técnica que se llamaba pass de hash. que consiste en no craquear la contraseña y pasarla directamente para autenticarse contra otro sistema. ¿Qué contramedida efectiva hay para evitar ese tipo de ataque en entornos Microsoft?
The solution for pass the hash is to move to a Kerberos authentication, the next step up, disallowing NTLM requirements. So there are options in your global policy, GPOs, to say don't use NTLM, use Kerberos. As far as I know, that has not been impacted in the same fashion yet. Time will tell.
Okay, thank you. Entonces, le damos las gracias a Kurt.
Thank you.
Alright, entonces vamos a tomar un break de 25 minutos. Entonces, si pueden...